Boom. I need an intro song. No, I don't. That would be lame. We'll just ignore that on the left-hand side there, yeah. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Fullpitch podcast. I know the upload schedule that I said I was going to do, I didn't. That's my bad. But once again, thank you to everyone who's tuning in, who's watched our previous episodes on Spotify, YouTube. The clips have been a little bit hard on Instagram and TikTok, but they will be coming back out. Thank you, everyone. It's like kind of cool. The YouTube, I posted my first ever like video thing on YouTube as well, and it did pretty well. So if you're coming back and watching this again, thank you very, very much. Bit of a weird review to get into today because I'm filming this on a Sunday, so there are still two games. There was only meant to be one, but obviously, and we'll get to it, the Central Coast Mariners versus Bulls fixture got postponed. But let's start off with a little bit of news around the footballing world because, geez, there is plenty to get into. One of the biggest ones, although there's been a few, has been the starting of the OFC Pro League over this weekend. So one of the big fixtures from that was Auckland FC versus South Island FC. Little bit of a Kiwi derby to kick us off, and like all in all, it's going to be good football. I think okay, who do I think is going to win the league? I think Auckland FC will win the league just because of the resources they've got there. Now that doesn't discount any of the other teams, but it's the first time there's kind of been this Oceania professional league, and we are dealing with some less profitable entities within this professional division, whereas Auckland FC have obviously established themselves in the A-League and are able to use some of those resources in the OFC. But this is going to be a fantastic competition just in general for the area. Again, you've got teams like South Melbourne that are competing in 3 different competitions at the moment, or Doherty Cup or whatever it is as well. Like, the opportunity for games is just absolutely relentless now. And for all the players, like you've got someone like Geordie Swibble who was playing in Canada not that long ago, came back to Australia to play with Marconi, played with them in the Oz Championship, and is now down with South Melbourne doing the OFC Pro League. Like, the opportunity for players is just ever expanding. So if you're a youth talent who wants to go professional, you don't have to look overseas as much anymore. It's right here in Australia. And I think going forward in terms of how does our A-League competition develop and everything like that, well, we don't have the tiered system that the UK or the UAE or anything like that have, where there's promotion and relegation through multiple professional divisions. So by having all these different professional competitions coming together in such a close proximity, obviously like in actual kilometers traveled it is quite vast, but to be able to have so many competitions happening in such close proximity, it gives players the opportunity to go and play with a Vanuatu FC and then progress in, get themselves seen on a professional level, and then come back in and potentially get themselves contract with A-League clubs. And vice versa, players that are contracted to A-League clubs that might not be getting minutes still get opportunities to go and get minutes in professional environments. So I think the OFC Pro League is like another really important stepping stone into creating this Oceania powerhouse where Australia, New Zealand, all these different countries are then able to work in unison in developing this really rigorous footballing system, because we don't have the pyramid that a lot of other countries have over in Europe and stuff like that. So the OFC Pro League, keep an eye out on it. Most of the games are being streamed on FIFA Plus. I actually haven't checked it out yet. I need to log in and see what all of that looks like. But that's going to be a really cool one to keep an eye on, and we'll touch base on how that's going at multiple points throughout this this podcast in its longevity, because I'm sure it's going to be super fruitful. Next on the news for the week is Ryan Teague has transferred to Melbourne City. Now, this is a super smart move for Ryan Teague because coming into the World Cup campaign, he's going to come back and he's probably going to rip and tear in the A-League. But as a signing, for those who don't know, Ryan Teague was a Sydney FC youth and then made his professional debut with Sydney FC. Then he went to Melbourne Victory, where he spent a few years, and then had a brief stint overseas, and he's now come back to Melbourne City. Melbourne Victory and Melbourne City are meant to have this really intense rivalry, and there's a few players now that have represented both clubs, and what's worse for Ryan Teague is that he was quoted in one of his last Melbourne derbies as saying, "We hate them," referencing Melbourne City. Now, I say this a lot to children, is that hate's a very strong word. So if you're going to use it, make sure there's meaning behind it. If you truly hate a club and then go and represent said club, do you really hate them? Like, really? I don't think... Look, obviously you want to try and create drama, you want to try and bring the crowds in, get a bit more conflict, the storyline. Like, people watch sport for drama. There's some people that are the football purists that want to see the ball get fucking pinged 40 yards, switched in behind the line, everything like that, which is amazing to see. People watch football for the drama. They want to feel the heart in their mouth pounding when their team's 1-0 with 2 minutes to go and the other team's holding on to possession and building up. That's what people watch football for. So the storyline, I get like kind of forcing and generating that drama, but Fategi, he's walking a really, really treacherous line at the moment where what I would hate to see is if he at some point represents Western Sydney Wanderers, because then the game's gone. What rivalries? Like, we're trying to create these huge storylines within the A-League to draw crowds in, and we'll get to it in a minute with how successful the Originals derby is, because that game was really good on the weekend. But yeah, do the rivalries really mean as much when players are just so flippantly able to go to clubs that they supposedly hate? And man, chase your bag. It's a World Cup campaign year. Like, you're pushing for selection into that Socceroos side. So I get it. I'm not saying that there's anything personal against Ryan Teague here, because he's quite a good player. And if I was in his situation, I'd be doing everything I could to be able to get into that Socceroos squad, to be able to fly over to Mexico, Canada, and the USA. It just, like, what does it mean now? What does it mean to play for one of these rivalry clubs, because you're more than willing to go and switch sides in a couple of years? Yeah, odd one for me. But that's all I've got to say on that. And then finally, in our news topics for the week, we're keeping it quite short, but we have the new Football Australia CEO, Martin Kugler, coming in and is ready to take football in Australia to the next step. Now, I spoke about this in one of my earlier episodes, that Football Australia, I was more specifically referencing the A-Leagues, but Football Australia as a whole needs someone who's a bit more of a visionary, someone with really big growth ambitions that's going to be kind of the solid foundation for the game to grow off. And from everything I've heard in the press conferences, everything like that, Martin seems to be that person. He seems really driven to be able to grow the game in Australia and continue this growth of Australia as a powerhouse in the footballing scene. Like, we are competitive and we have really good games, but I just think that our national leagues are kind of perceived as a bit of a joke. We're either a development ground to go and ship players off, or we're a retirement village. Like, Juan Mata is still playing fantastic football, but realistically, he didn't come here to advance his career. He came here because Australia is a beautiful place to live and it's a great place to retire. Like, he's getting paid to do something that he loves on what is probably a less intense schedule than what he was on in Europe. And he's doing it in a beautiful city, which is Melbourne. And then last year you got the opportunity to do it in Sydney as well. Like, why wouldn't you? But I think we need to get out of that kind of perception where, as a league, we're starters and enders. There are some people who have had some really great careers in the A-League, but there's more growth to be had here. There's more room for visionaries like Martin to come in and use their experiences and really create a solid backbone for the league to be able to grow into something that's really competitive. Like, what I'd love to see here is really pushing for multiple professional tiers. I just spoke about it with the OFC Pro League, but Australia needs a promotion and relegation system. It has to happen. Like, it's not a theoretically good idea anymore. This is where Australia's at, is that within the next 5 years, we need to have promotion and relegation between whatever leagues are going to be in the A-League, because the standard in the A-League at the moment is complicit and it's so all over the place. There's no predictability to any of the games. If we implement a promotion and relegation, one, there's consequences for that lack of predictability. If you're losing multiple games on a roll and then have a one-off good game here and there, you're going to get relegated. So the incentive for teams to perform and be a little bit more rigorous is higher. Obviously, they all want to win the trophy. I don't think there's any A-League team that's going in going, yeah, we want to finish mid-table. But the accountability is created when relegation's on the line. And likewise, you get these really good storylines of teams like a Sutherland Sharks that are on the rebuild. If they had the opportunity to then qualify for the A-League, that would be an absolutely immense storyline for them. Why did I stutter on that? That would be an absolutely amazing storyline for Sutherland Sharks, a club that was like on the brink of going down a league into Football New South Wales League 2, becoming an amateur football side, to then go through this rebuild and then qualify for the A-Leagues. That would just be absolute cinema. So I think we're at a point now as a country and as a league where we need to start bringing in promotion, relegation. In terms of the actual footballing operations, I don't know a whole detailed amount about that. I'm assuming that Martin's going to be able to lead the way there as well. But as long as we're strategic in our growth plans as well, because what we don't want to do is put ourselves in a financially kind of vulnerable situation. Obviously, with Western United and their financial difficulties, I know that the A-Leagues are a separate entity technically, but we don't want to try and grow too big for our own boots. Like, we need to also have a really good plan around how we implement these things. We don't want to try and do too much too early and then overcommit financially and then end up with nothing. But I think from everything I've seen, from all the media that's coming out, I think there's some really good signs here. But yeah, what we can do with it, that's up to Martin, that's up to the new team that comes in. Obviously, we've already got some pretty good heads within the Football Australian scene, so exciting times ahead. Okay, and that is the news topics for the last week. Now, I don't officially work with this person, but Football 360 AU is where I'm getting a lot of this stuff from as well. So I'm getting a lot of my information, I'm getting a lot of my news stories from Football 360 AU. So if you haven't already, check them out on TikTok, Instagram, wherever you can. Give them a follow because they are always super quick on any footballing news that comes out pertaining to Australia and even some global news. And it is really consistent and reliable information. So I always use Football 360 AU when I'm getting my information for these news topics. So 100% go check them out. Alrighty, now into our round 13, I believe it is, review. Our first game of the week is Melbourne City versus Auckland FC, 2-1 at Amy Park. And all I have to say is an echo of the message that I've been sending out. every single episode now, which is we need to stop playing out of these big box stadiums. Holy shit. Guys, what I don't understand is why clubs continue to spend the money on these stadiums. They're not cheap to rent out. And there can't be a great deal of profit being generated from these games when the attendance is so poor. I just don't get it. Like, we need to stop playing these fixtures. Like, I get that Melbourne City and Auckland are two big teams and two very competitive teams, but what I don't get is that we know this fixture isn't going to draw in a huge crowd. It's not going to be a 40,000 packs. It'll be 10, maybe. Like, so why not try and find a stadium that has a capacity of 15 to 20,000? Like, I'm looking at it here, the attendance was 5,000 on this game. So why not try and find a 15, 20,000 seater stadium? It's going to look way better on the TV. It's going to be a better atmosphere for the fans. We need to humble ourselves as a league and stop using these stadiums. Now, Melbourne City might have a long-term deal in place with Amy Park that I'm unaware of. And if that's the case, then fair enough. I apologise. But we need to stop trying to play these fixtures that aren't going to pull in a big crowd in these big box stadiums because they look terrible. But Melbourne City beating the top of the table, last year's A-League champions Auckland FC. This one was a good game. Now, Melbourne City dominating most of the possession, but all in all, this really was quite an even footballing game. Probably a bit more of a tug of war than what we've seen in recent weeks through both of these teams. So it's good to see them have to grind it out. I think Melbourne City were well and truly due for a win as well, coming off a few tough games in the past few weeks. And their attack spoke for it as well. Like, their shot percentage was really good. Obviously, scoring the 2 goals, they had 6 shots, 2 shots on target. And for Auckland FC as well, just got to pick up their shots on target. But the Auckland FC goalkeeper, let me double check his name because I'm an absolutely terrible... Michael Wood. It's probably Michael Wood. It's just spelt W-O-U-D. So however you say it, Michael, I'm sorry. But didn't even get the chance to make a save in this game. So the 2 goals conceded straight through him. They were the only 2 shots on target for Melbourne City as well. So Michael didn't even get a chance to make a save throughout this entire game. Now, that's not a criticism necessarily on him because it's the Auckland FC defence that would have been able to prevent a lot of those shots. So I think the Auckland FC, even their defensive stats look quite good throughout this game. But what I would have liked to see is just a few more shots and a few more shots on target. Again, Auckland FC's 9 shots on target, 3. We know that Melbourne City are a pretty reasonable defensive side, but the Auckland FC defence was pretty good. Again, a 60% tackle success rate. They had 40 clearances throughout this game, and they did 43 recoveries. So, well and truly a good stint through the Auckland FC defensive side. Melbourne Victory, just when they got their shots on target, they were able to find good areas in goal and finished on them, capitalised on the opportunities that they worked hard to create. So I think that's a very, very good one. Again, because I don't have a Paramount Plus subscription, my ability to analyse these games in depth is somewhat impacted. And then I also play football myself, so sometimes I'm not able to watch all of the games, so I do apologise. Realistically, though, not a whole lot to comment on this game. It was just a really solid tug-of-war of a game, something that we don't see a lot of in the A-League because sometimes we have these really one-sided games. So it was really good to see kind of 2 titans within this league just go at it. Yeah, that's kind of everything I've got for that one. Moving on to our second game of the round, we have Perth Glory 1 to Brisbane Roar 2. and just heard me reference storylines earlier, and holy crap did this game deliver in one. So the context for this game is their coach, Michael Valkanis, obviously had his time off a few weeks ago from being sent off, but this week had to travel back to Greece for a family emergency, which is 100% fair enough as well. Like, family takes priority over everything. Like, at the end of the day, football's just a game. It's very serious for a lot of people, but if there's a family emergency, that takes precedence. So he had to leave to go and be with his family, but his son decided to stay in Australia and to play, which is a really tough decision for him to have to make as well, is because he could have quite have easily gone with his dad. No one would have judged him for it. No one would have talked down about him for it. So he really made this strong personal decision to stay and play. And through that, obviously Brisbane Roar, we know, are quite a passionate, quite an emotive side as well. They got around him, and I think they were just up for this game. Again, I'm going to say the Western Australia time slots suck. They're terrible for viewing across the broader Australia. But the Western Australia fans show up for it. The Perth fans show up. So that's good at least. But in this game, let's go into the stats. So where are we, ladies and gentlemen? Why is it doing this to me? Anyway, so Brisbane Roar come out in this game, and it's a relatively even match to start off with. It's kind of you standard to and fro. So again, 2-1. Why is my laptop playing up on me? Don't do this to me now. Please be kind. There we are. All right. Yeah, so Perth Glory are really starting to build this kind of notoriety around being this strong, mentally resilient side. And again, Adam Taggart on goal. Perth Glory had majority possession in this game, 54%. The stats are all very well even, except for fouls won. Brisbane Roar won a few more fouls. But the reality is that this was a pretty even footballing game. So Perth Glory score first in the 19th minute. As they do, they tend to come out hard and fast and just try and run you off the pitch. I spoke about this last week, but that seems to be Perth Glory's style at the moment, is they come and outwork you from the start, and then they just try and hold in. But Brisbane Roar this week just were on a complete another level. And they came back, they got a penalty in the 30th minute, which they were able to score from. And then in the 50th minute, just after half time, they were able to get another goal. After this second goal, this game turned into a scrap, because as I spoke about, Perth Glory constantly on the attack, constantly looking to create opportunities, be a threat, get forward. But Brisbane Roar are just that gritty, stick in the game kind of side. And this week they had that kind of personal motivation along with the professional ambition to win this game. And I think that was just the edge that they needed to get them over the line. In the last 10 minutes of this game, there were 4 yellow cards. Now, it's professional football, so obviously there's passion, but that just speaks to how gritty and how intense this game became, is that both sides were just going at it to such an extent that 4 yellow cards within a 10-minute time span, for those of you who don't know, is a pretty ridiculous amount. In the last 10 minutes of the game, there's a heap of fatigue in the game. Can't remember what the weather was like over in Perth, but I'm sure it would have been pretty warm, so the legs are getting heavy. To be able to hang in as a Brisbane Roar side against a Perth Glory side that will not stop trying to take shots is an absolutely amazing feat. But even still, the stats, Brisbane Roar absolutely peppered the Perth Glory goal. Their attacking stats, they won absolutely everything. So obviously Perth got the 1 goal to Brisbane Roar's 2. Brisbane Roar had 22 shots in this game. That is more than what I've reviewed so far in any other match, with Perth Glory only getting 9. Of the 22 shots though, Brisbane Roar only got 8 on target. Really low percentage, but when you're getting down that end so frequently and when you're able to continuously create these opportunities for yourself, 8 shots on target, it's still more than Perth Glory's 5. So you're creating more opportunities, and if you just keep pulling the trigger, something's going to drop, and that's what we saw in this game. Everything else, like 12 shots outside of the box, 10 shots from inside of the box. Shot accuracy, excluding block shots, 61% for Brisbane Roar versus 62% for Perth Glory. All in all, again, just another really gritty game. These are probably two sides where I think they buy very heavily into the mental side of the game as well, as being able to out-grit and kind of out-strategize your opponent. Their coach, again, why am I forgetting his name? But the Perth Glory coach is a bit of an interesting character. So I'm sure he's using some lion and goat on the hill and all that crap analogies. But probably two really mentally resilient sides just going at it in this one. And I think the result was, one, an entertaining game for the fans, being that 12,500 of them showed up, which is a fantastic attendance for the A-League. But that we got to see this really beautiful storyline of Brisbane Roar as well, like going back into the change rooms and being able to FaceTime Michael Valkanis and celebrate the win with him. And I hope everything with him and his family is all right, and everyone's well. I haven't heard any more news updates come out about that, so I'm presuming he should be back in Australia soon. But look, what's important right now is that he's with his family, and good on Brisbane Roar for being able to get that victory. So that was a wholesome little storyline for our week. Now, geez, I know podcasting is talking, but I feel like I talk too much for a podcast. I'm go. But that's what this weekend requires, because our next game is Western Sydney Wanderers versus the Newcastle Jets. Western Sydney Wanderers going down 1 to the Newcastle Jets 2. And the headline for this one is a free kick masterclass from the Newcastle Jets. So for anyone who's seen it, Jets, they would have had to have practiced this. This would have been a planned set piece. But in this range, to be able to pretty much stun the Wanderers' defence by slipping a ball back in and then being able to hit it into the right side of the goal, this was a absolutely beautiful free kick. And I'm going to talk a little bit from a goalkeeper's perspective here, obviously that being my position. But when you set your wall up there, so you're looking at probably the dominant kicker, which from that position, it is going to be that left footer swinging it back into the near post. So he set up his wall to cover his near post, and then Lawrence has set himself up just on the outside of his 4-man wall. So he's probably thinking the wall will cover anything near, he'll cover the far post. Sweet. The setup actually looked fine. Like there was nothing glaringly obvious that kind of created an opportunity. But what happened is when Glory, I'm still stuck on the last game. When Jets have run in, they've then slipped the ball back in behind, which has shifted the wall, opened up a little bit more space between Lawrence and his defensive wall, and then they've been able to slip it in and around. And as a goalkeeper there, when your wall moves, you're not able to readjust quick enough. Some keepers can, but they're probably preempting this type of shot. This one was very hard to anticipate. So Lawrence just found himself on the wrong side of the goal, and it was a really tidy finish. I can't remember who scored it. Was it Eli Adams? Maybe not. Potentially. Possibly. Let me have a look. But regardless of who it was, I'll confirm in a second. that is just a super tidy set piece. Like, the weight of that roll needs to be perfect. The timing of the runs need to be perfect. If it's a little bit too late, then it's completely useless. And yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Eli Adams that put this one away. So, like, Newcastle Jets, in terms of free kicks, set pieces, everything like that, they're really starting to build up this amazing looking highlight reel. So, like, kudos to them. Scoring 2 early goals as well, both of them occurring within the first half. Alrighty. Wanderers in this game dominated the percentage of possession, so they had 56% possession to 43, but if there's one thing we've learnt by now, it's that possession is not an important stat, especially in this league. On Wanderers, what can I say? There was good signs last week after their win against Melbourne Victory. It's just, there's still some serious issues within this footballing club. Again, scoring a late goal is great in the 83rd minute, but let me double check from the top of my memory. They're not creating many chances. Again, the shots were even at 16 and 16, shots on target 7 to 6. So they were getting down there. Again, it's just, their academy system is so good that I don't know how they're not producing the quality in their A-League sides. Unless their academy system's too good that when their players graduate, they automatically have to go overseas because there's just too much interest. They're such high quality of players. Which they'd be absolutely kicking themselves about that 16-year-old that went to, AS Roma. Well, they wouldn't be, because obviously you want your players to go off and succeed as much as possible. But I reckon they would have loved to have him in their A-League squad as well. Yeah, but for Western Sydney, there's deeper problems here than just the footballing side. Like, the 11 blokes on the pitch, the squad of 16 or 20 or however many they take to a match day, however many they're using to select from, that's whatever. The problems for this club run deeper than the men just running out onto that pitch. There's some problems in the administration with the decisions they're making around this club. Again, the coaches need to change. There's been a few different speculations around what the coaches' changes are going to look like. There's a few different people kind of in the running for this Western Sydney job at the moment. If there's one thing I know, it's that they need to get rid of their coach currently, because he is just not leading that side the way they need to be. It's actually disappointing to see Western Sydney go through this deep of a rut, both in the A-League men's and women's. It's just kind of devastating. But on the counter, to bring on to some positive notes, Newcastle Jets are really coming along in strides. This team, like, we saw it in their Australia Cup campaign, they're quite a young squad. Like, a lot of A-League experience in and around, but in terms of age, like, they are a really young squad. So there's a lot of young heads in this team that, from an outside looking in, you might think that they need those couple of older heads just to guide them around the park. But I think Mark Milligan's doing a really good job as coach in being able to guide these boys throughout the week of training so that they're making the right decisions on game day. Like, it's just, you look at the likes of Lockie Scott, Eli Adams, there's a few other young ones in and around that squad that are, Lockie Rose, that are doing really good things and progressing really well, and, like, honestly building up their own personal brands too. Like, the team they've got there really does fit Newcastle, because it's young. They're the kind of boys that, are just going to go out and enjoy their time, be relaxed, chill out. There's not a whole lot of animosity within that group from an outsider looking in. Like, it does look like a really unified playing group, which just absolutely fits the vibe of Newcastle. What I really want to see from Jets, though, less on their actual footballing performances, more on them building towards an A-League championship, is can they retain this side for the next 3 to 5 years? That's going to be the telltale sign of the Jets' success. I think if they turn over a majority of their players within the next kind of 1 to 2 years, they kind of just go back down into this really troublesome period where they've got to nurture their youth talent again and try and dig their way out of that rut. And even news like Lockie Rose potentially looking at a move to Western Sydney Wanderers. There was some transfer news come out about that was speculation. I personally hate that because I think Lockie Rose is absolutely thriving in the environment he's in right now. And that environment in Newcastle is absolutely peak for any aspiring footballers because you're still in a professional league, but you're outside of Sydney where there's a lot of attention around the clubs in Sydney and there's a lot of football going on, whereas football is still good in Newcastle, but probably less people pay as much attention to it. So when you're going around the street, you're probably not getting recognised too much. You're able to live a relatively normal life outside of your professional commitments, which for young players is kind of essential because you don't get distracted by all the attention and popularity and all that stuff. And it also gives you a really good opportunity as a player to go around and build connections as well and kind of be a part of the community. I think there's some teams, like again, football in Australia, there are some players that are really notable, but overarchingly it's a pretty silent league in the way of you're not going to get necessarily recognised in public too frequently. But I think just being in Newcastle, with that being even less so, players just feel more comfortable in their own personal lives as well, getting around. That's kind of what I've got, is just in terms of Newcastle's success in the long term, being able to keep this group of players in its majority together for a few more years, that'll really put them in a strong position to make a push for a A-League trophy in the next few years, hopefully. Really, really excited with what I'm seeing coming out of coming out of the Newcastle Jets. And for a town that, like, I personally love, I love Newcastle, although I live in Sydney. Just absolutely love the vibe of Newcastle, and I love that this team's kind of representing that vibe quite well. And then on to our 7:35 game at Coopers Stadium. We have Adelaide United taking on Melbourne Victory in the Originals derby. And I saw a video on TikTok, I think it was Joe Kay put this one out on his personal page, about this being one of the best rivalries we've got in the league. Now, we had a crowd attendance of just about 15,000 for this one, with Adelaide United winning 2 against Melbourne Victories, 1 at home for Adelaide United. And this game, just the storyline in it was beautiful. So we had Craig Goodwin come in and score in the 6th minute, where that's super early, the game's just getting started, you're just finding the flow, and then bang, Craig Goodwin strikes. And then for the majority of this game, it was an absolute tug of war with both sides going at it. And then in the 75th minute, Grimaldi's able to pull one back for Melbourne Victory to bring it 1-1 level. And then in the 97th minute, the 7th minute of injury time, Kiddo is able to come through and snag the winner for Adelaide United at home in the Originals derby. It is just absolute chaos, and the crowd went absolutely off its head. And if we come in and look at the stats of this game, again, I use the stats to guide a lot of my analysis, but this game was just a true gritty match. Again, the possession relatively even across the board. The duels dead even at 50-50, 112 to 112. The dual success rate pretty much 50-50 again as well. This game was just an absolute grind. It was Australian football in its purest form, and I think that like the fans that showed out were just treated to an absolute masterclass. Anyone that watched this game, whether you're a fan of either of these sides or just a fan of football in general, you would have been entertained by what was happening on this footballing pitch. And it just kind of begs the question back to what I was talking about with Ryan Teague around what is the importance of rivalries in the A-League? Because I know personally, Sydney FC versus Western Sydney Wanderers, the Sydney Derby, to me is the biggest game of the year. That's the one I'll go to. That's the one we get 40,000 fans to. Like, in terms of revenue for these Sydney clubs, that game is an absolute standout. And the scenes there are amazing. The supporter stands just go off their heads. You've got the RBV versus the Cove. Like, it is, like, there's so much content and passion and so much drive and determination that comes out around those games that, like, it just makes you invested in what the sport is. And again, games like this where there's this historic rivalry, there's this, it's like a cultural clash where we're not dealing with culture in terms of like Croatia and everything like that, but you got your Melbourne versus Adelaide, like these really big cities that take pride in their sport and that want to represent their city, their state to the best of their ability. Like, people showing out in droves is just amazing. Like, 14,000 for a game in Adelaide is pretty bloody good. Yeah, like, all I can say for this game is that the footballing side of things was really, really tight. Like, I was playing at the time that this game was being played, so I wasn't able to watch it to any great detail, but it's just the highlights, man. It was just a really tight tug of war, like a really intense game of football. I want to be able to give this game more time, but I can't because it was such a full-on game. Like, it just pure cinema. Pure cinema is all I can say for this one. But to kind of grow off the point I was just talking about is that if you are a fan of soccer in Australia and you wake up at 3 a.m. to go and watch whoever it is, Arsenal play Liverpool or all your English Premier League sides, all I can implore you to do is just support local as well. Watch your local football. Go to a game. Get 3, 4, 5, 6 of your mates together. And if you're not interested in the football, make your own entertainment in being able to sit down, have a few beers with your mates, go and like engage in football, because that's the only thing that's going to make this product better in Australia, because we've got the quality because we're selling them overseas and they're dominating. We've got Adrian Segacic going overseas and absolutely tearing it up in the championship. We've got Iracundo overseas absolutely tearing it up in the championship. We've got all these little bits of talent that are scattered around the world at the moment, which will support them when they're playing in those other international leagues. We need to support our homegrown talent because games like this are absolutely phenomenal for building the notoriety of the league. And I think if we get around these kind of rivalries, we continue the storylines, we continue to push with this kind of hatred between each other. Like, it's not a true hatred, but these teams that are competing against each other, that's what's going to go this game in Australia. So this Originals Derby, really good for the game, fantastic one to watch. And me personally, do I think it's the best derby? No. I'm obviously going to think the Sydney Derby is the best derby, but this one was a really intense and quality game of football. Now into a slightly unique scenario, because I'm going to be previewing Sunday's games that are happening today. We've got Central Coast Mariners taking on the MacArthur Bulls today. This game was meant to happen yesterday. MacArthur, by the way, MacArthur Bulls. This game was meant to happen yesterday, but was postponed due to extreme weather conditions. Obviously, Polytech Stadium probably needs a little bit of a drainage upgrade, the same as what Allianz just got, because it was a swimming pool yesterday. So that game got postponed until today, so it was played at 2 p.m. It's currently live. The score is 0-0. In this game, I think that Bulls will probably come out with a win, just because their recent run of form has been something tremendous. They've found themselves in a really good position where they're playing good football. I think Central Coast, there's a little bit too much going on in that side. Just everything that's happened with the APL takeover, and then everything else that's surrounding kind of the uncertainty of the club's financial situation and that sale condition. I think that kind of outsized noise can be a bit of a disruption. But yeah, MacArthur Bulls have been playing well, so credit to them. Keep it up. But yeah, I think Bulls win this one. I think it'll be a tight one, 1-0. I think the delay would have affected both of the teams to some extent. They would have gone out yesterday and tried to do something to keep themselves active. But yeah, I think Bulls are in for the win on this one. And then our last game of the round being Sydney FC taking on Wellington Phoenix. Sydney FC back at Allianz Stadium. First game back. They've marketed this run really well, so I'm hoping the attendance is going to be pretty good. I'm expecting kind of 10 to 15,000 attendance for this one. Allianz is great. I love the sporting precinct around there. I love that they've got the little bars all around, and you can really create, like, Sunday afternoon at Allianz is a vibe. Like, that's a great place to have it. I'm going to back Sydney FC for this game, but I do just have this weird feeling that Wellington Phoenix just love being the party crashers now. Obviously, a few weeks ago against Brisbane Roar in a sold-out KO stadium, Phoenix came in, stole the show there, and absolutely dominated Roar in what I think was a 3-0 win. I don't think this happens with Sydney FC based on their performance from last week and how I think they're going to continue to build and grow from that. But there is just this weird little thought in the back of my head that goes, maybe Phoenix might enjoy being the party crashers just a bit too much. It seems like there's been two big occasions now where they can come in and just kind of steal the moment a little bit and take a bit of that glory for themselves. But no, I think Western Sydney will really control this game Sydney FC will really control this game quite well. And I'll put them down for what I think will be a pretty convincing 3-1 victory. All right, that is the Fullpitch podcast episode for this week. The upload schedule is kind of out the window. It's just kind of happening when it happens, so deal with it. Sorry. But if you did like this episode, make sure to leave a like, make sure to follow, head over to our TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, give all those a follow. We'll be posting clips, everything like that. That's it for me this week, guys. If you have anything you want me to talk about or anything you'd like me to dive a bit more into and have a chat about, make sure to leave it in the comments. But if that's all, I'll see you when I'm looking at you.